it away, Joyce. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me. As Amanda knows already, I love teaching. I think, teachers are the backbone of society. When I was teaching at a university, I told my husband, I decided I was just going to be their parent, because a lot of things students, if I know that you need to know something, I'm going to tell you. Or I'm going to ask you, is it okay for me to tell you this, because I thought it might be useful to you. And at the university level, if you talk to students' parents, you got into trouble. You weren't allowed. They're adults, and you're not allowed to talk to the parents. But one of my students, who was always coming to school late, I explained to her why she had to be on time, and she shows up on time, and she says, I said, "Oh, I'm so happy to see you." And she said her mother made her skip breakfast and get to school on time. And then I felt like, oh no, I need to take her to get her some food, right? She pulls up a bag and she says, "Oh, my mother sent me a lunch." I said, "Tell your mother I love her." The student says to me, "You could tell her." She calls her mother on her cell phone with her mother. And I told my chair, who almost had a heart attack, but I said, look, I just thanked her mother for doing, but it was a group effort, basically. It was her mother and two of us working on this student to teach her some life lessons. You have to try to be on time. And my mother always said, if you're not early, you're late. So she always thought you should be ahead of time. But anyway, I'm an artist. I've been an artist since I was a little girl. When nobody could identify me as an artist, my mother told me I was drawing all the time, and people thought that she should send me to art school, which she didn't do. But eventually, I went to school, and I went to the neighborhood playground, and I had, but they weren't really teaching little kids how to be artists. They were really just giving you materials and saying, make something, So I'd make things, and then actually, when I got to high school, I had a teacher named Walter Lubar. It's amazing how teachers who some teachers will change your lives, guys. Some teachers are going to tell you something that you really needed to hear. The teacher may not even know you needed to hear it, But Walter Lubar said to me, when I was in high school, he said, "You see very well." I said, "Oh no, Mr. Lubar, I've been wearing glasses since I was about in 3rd grade or something." He said, "Oh, that's not what I mean. I mean that you have a way of looking at things that is really unique and different." And he says, "You're an artist." I'm like, okay. And then he left. He got promoted to the Board of Education in Philadelphia. So he was no longer my teacher. But I took him seriously. I remembered that, and I kept working. And, I tried to do everything I could that had to do with art. And so what you do as a student, your teacher can teach you certain things, but a lot of the work has to come from you. A lot of the work has to be, your input. In terms of who should be an artist and who shouldn't be an artist, I think anybody can be an artist. I don't think I told Amanda, I think the other day, that I don't believe in talent. I believe that if you want to do something, you can do it. For example, I told Richard Hunt, when he was the first artist I met when I came to Chicago, because my teacher at Howard told me from undergraduate school, told me when I came to Chicago, I needed to meet Richard Hunt and I needed to meet Martin Puryear. So the first one I met was Richard Hunt, and we, went back and forth and did different things over the years. And I asked him early on, I said, I said to him, I really envy sculptors. I wish I could make sculpture, because I took sculpture in college, but it wasn't anything. It was sort of a survey class. It wasn't something that we really experienced deep passion. At least I wasn't very passionate about it. I took ceramics. I took a lot of different classes. I didn't work in metals though. And I still don't work in metals. I work in assembled wood pieces. I might have some metal added to them. These are some pieces I'm working on, so they're not even finished. But I like assembling wood and painting them. I don't know if you can see them, but and I use other found materials. Like this is some canvas on the bottom that I put glued to with some probably gesso or something, and I attach to the wood that's on the bottom. I find pieces and I assemble them. Sometimes I cut pieces and assemble them. But I was like, you know, being a sculptor, first of all, students, if you decide you want to be a sculptor, sculptors make more money, I think, than any other artists make. Because first of all, you can do public work that'll be outside and people will pay a lot of money for that, like, you know, at a square or in front of the library, in front of City Hall. And painters can make a lot of money. The living artists today are making a lot of money. Living painters are making a lot of money. It takes a lot of work to get yourself known. And then if you're lucky and you win some sort of award, like a Genius Award, what did they make? $250,000 or something like that. That's unsupervised spending. I met Carrie James Marshall. I don't know if you guys have heard of Carrie James Marshall. Yeah, but I met him I think at a party at Paul Klein's years ago. And actually, I asked Carrie James Marshall and his wife, Cheryl Lynn Bruce, who's an actor, if they would be the speakers at an Arts Alliance Illinois conference several years ago. And when I was put on this committee and we were trying to figure out who would be the keynote speakers. So I said, Carrie James Marshall and Cheryl Lynn Bruce. And Carrie, if you ever come into Chicago, go to the public library. There's a huge painting that he did on the side of the library. He's done, he's a MacArthur genius. Oh, I know, I met him on Aaron Freeman's show many years ago. Aaron Freeman was a comedian. And he also had a show, and he had Carrie and I on, and we were talking about whether artists could make money or not. And I said, well, it's really hard. And Carrie says, no, it's not, because he knew how to make money. But the thing of it is that whatever job you have, you need to make a living. So if you're an artist, you need to make sure you have an income. What I've discovered over time is that I've known artists who only want to make money making art, but you have to get that education and you have to be eligible to do other things. For example, that's why I was able to teach for many years. But I know a lot of artists who don't have any money, and they're always either begging people to buy their art, and you can't make somebody buy your art. They buy it if they want to. But I believe in having a source of income, having a job. It might be teaching, which is a great job because you learn so much from teaching your students new techniques, and you learn more about the techniques yourself. And teaching is not a bad job to have at all. I love teaching, and I taught from being a counselor at a camp in the Pocono Mountains when I was like 17, up to just a few years ago when I decided to retire from Chicago State University because I did need to have more time to work on my art. And so, for me, I do a lot of different things. My degrees are in painting, but in undergraduate school, when I got my BFA, I did ceramics, I did painting, I did drawing, and numerous, life drawing and other drawing. I did watercolor. I was lucky that I went to Howard University at a time that there were some really iconic people. I don't know if you heard of Dr. David Driscoll, who recently passed away, but he had the Driscoll Center in Maryland. Uh, um, Lois Maylou Jones was one of my teachers. Ed Love was a sculptor, and I should have learned how to work in metals from Ed Love, but if you go online, you'll see Ed Love sculptures. Um, you know, in a good undergraduate program, you're going to experience a range of mediums. And then from that, you can decide what's your favorite thing to do. Printmaking, you know, lithographs, lino cuts, you know, there's a whole range of techniques. And people were surprised with me when they said, well, you know, you're a painter, so you don't know anything about this. Well, I knew about a lot of stuff because I went to an undergraduate school where they exposed you to everything. Mm-hmm. I'm good at everything. I'm not good at, nobody's good at everything, but at least I had the exposure. So I heard of encaustic. You know, people will talk to me like I must not know about these things. And, you know, I mean, I can remember judging a show at Woman Made Gallery, and one of the artists had submitted a silver point. And the judges, I wasn't the only judge, the judges said, oh, that drawing is weak. I said, why do you think it's weak? It was beautifully drawn. They said, because it's so light. I said, do you know what a silver point is? Do you know that over time, this is gonna, it's gonna, I can't think of the word now, but it's gonna get darker over time because it's like, you know, like a silver jewelry gets darker.
Like oxidizes?
Thank you, that's the word I was trying to think of. Thank you.
Yep.
It oxidizes, and so it got darker. And I said, you know, I don't know why you know, why are people judging an art show who don't know about these various techniques? But anyway, the piece was accepted at my insistence, and it was gorgeous. By the time it was in the exhibition, it was just beautiful. So it's good to, even if you don't take classes in everything, because you can't take classes in everything, the good thing is to get exposure to stuff, read about it, maybe watch a video of somebody, you know, experiencing some sort of, or, you know, doing some sort of medium that you don't know about, because then sometimes you learn that you want to do something. I never knew I wanted to do sculpture, as I said. And when I was saying that Richard Hunt, I told Richard Hunt one day we were talking, and I said, boy, I really envied sculptors. And I wish I'd studied sculpture. He said, just do it. So the sculptures that I do are based on what I can figure out how to do with, you know, low-tech equipment. So that's what I do. So I don't know if anybody wants to chime in with questions, or if you want me to talk some more. One of my
students, do you have any questions? You can drop into the chat at any time. And then, yeah, Joyce, I think if, you know, Crystal, please jump in if there's anything pertinent to your class as well too. But I think, you know, if you want to share anything about some of your artist inspirations, or, you know, where you gather that source of inspiration for your art over the years, I think that was a really interesting segment of our last conversation too.
Well, Picasso and the artists in France, in Paris, who were.
Oh, Joyce, I'm sorry to interrupt you. We've lost some of your screen. We've just got your eyes. We'd love to see your face. There you go. Thank you so much.
I moved the computer. That's what happened. Norman Mailer wrote the book on Picasso that I alluded to before, and I was reading about it, and there are photographs of him, and he created Cubism. Well, he didn't. Picasso stole everything he could from everybody he could. Georges Braque, with whom he worked, created Cubism, and then they collaborated together on some things. And so I think Picasso's first Cubist piece was, showing his influence, was Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, where he did a painting of these women, of these street women. Don't tell your parents I talked to you about street women, okay? he, that's just women walking down the street. And so he did this painting, and then he changed the painting because he had seen this cubism and to reflect what he had seen. And some of his collectors thought he had lost his mind, so he had a little problem with those collectors. But over time, as people understood it, what he neglected to tell people is that it was African art that influenced his transition to abstract work. And there was some guy, you know, I don't know if you know that Picasso was accused of stealing the Mona Lisa. It wasn't Picasso who stole the Mona Lisa. It was an Italian postal worker who thought the Mona Lisa, because it was done by Leonardo da Vinci, should have been in Italy. So Picasso didn't do that, but he did steal African art and incorporated it into his art to create a new art style, and that he almost go ahead and erase George Braque from it. So, but I'm influenced by him because of the Africanness of his work. And I like color, and there's everything I like about it. Oh, and the story I told too was that I had a piece in an auction at the DuSable Museum in Chicago. And this woman comes in who was a docent at the Art Institute in the Picasso room. And she saw my piece and she said, my husband and I have to have this piece. She said, because it just reminds me of Picasso to such an extent. Now, this woman was living with Picasso's on a regular basis as a docent. You guys, if you don't know what a docent is, your teacher will explain it to you. But she was working in the museum, and so she bought the piece because she said, I'll never be able to afford a Picasso if there's a Picasso on the market. I don't know if there's anybody selling any Picassos, but she said she'd never be able to afford a Picasso, but she could afford to buy that piece. And it also contributed money to the DuSable Museum. Mm-hmm. So I've been influenced by, you know, what I think you should do is you try as much as you can. That's why, you know, going to an undergraduate school where you're exposed to drawing, painting, printmaking, you know, all these different mediums helps you when you're trying to decide what you want to be as a creative person. Because I tell you, creativity, visual creativity, or any other kind of creativity can be extensive. We think we've seen everything, and then somebody shows up with something new. Like now, you know, I mean, this has been around for a while, but artists who work exclusively on computers. Mm-hmm. You know, they create art. They may draw by hand and load up their images, and then they can manipulate them and expand them and do all kinds of stuff on the computer. It's still art. It's just called computer art. And we're gonna, as you know, the earliest art, I guess, was cave drawings. You know, and we've come a long way from, and some of those cave drawings still exist, but you know, we've come along. Man and woman have always had an instinct to be creative. That's why we have the cave drawings, because it was also sort of like a religious pursuit in the cave drawings, where they thought if they drew a herd of buffalo would materialize so that they could feed their families from the buffalo meat. So it's a varied thing.
We do have a question for you from our student Julia. She asked, this may be like choosing a favorite child, but great question. Do you have a favorite piece that you've made? And you know, if so, will you tell us about it?
That is like asking about a favorite.
Do you have a favorite period of work, or one that's really meaningful to you?
You know, I really don't. And I go back and forth between, you know, like I might be working on one series, like with the constructions that I showed you guys. I might be working on a series. I have a group. I didn't count them, but I have a bunch of them that are in the process. And when I first started doing these, somebody said, but I thought you were a painter. I said, well, I paint on these too sometimes. I usually, anything that, anything that comes in within my space, I'm probably going to paint it. I painted on boxes, on chair. I was in something called the chair auction. I made a couple of chairs for that was also for charity. I'll paint on anything. But every once in a while, I remember I did this one piece that went to this prominent collection. She was the first commissioner of the Department of Cultural Affairs in Chicago under the Harold Washington administration, because they had this thing called Artists for Harold Washington, and they made demands. They were going to raise money for him, but they also made demands that they wanted a Department of Cultural Affairs. So she bought this piece from me, this woman. And I remember working on it, and it was some found stuff that, and it was, and I did some like a little color, but I kept not feeling the urge to paint on it. I kept not feeling it. I was like, and then I decided, you know what? I'm just gonna let it go without painting it. And I put it in a show, and she bought it. Without any paint. So the other thing for me as an artist, I think sometimes things feel right, sometimes things feel wrong. Sometimes you need to just put it in a corner and not look at it for a few days or a week or something, and then you bring it out with fresh, what I like to call fresh eyes, and you look at what you're doing. And I'm sure your teachers have already taught you that looking at it right side up is one thing, but looking at it upside down gives you another view of that same piece. So you want to look at, you might want to show it, hold it up sideways. If you change the perspective of how you're looking at things, sometimes you see things that you didn't see before. I know that sounds odd because you're looking at it out of whack, but sometimes you see things like you see something about the balance, or you see something, the balance, like the physical balance, the weight of the objects in the piece. And sometimes it's about the color balance. Maybe it's too much red, or maybe it's not enough red, or maybe it's, there are a number of different things that you can see by looking at. Now, if you want to, you could do a handstand or a headstand and move the piece, and you can get some exercise while you're doing it. Do a headstand or a handstand. So I just turn the work.
Joyce, what would your advice be for perhaps young artists developing and the trust of that voice that tells them, oh, something's wrong or something's off, or it's done and I need to leave it?
It's done when you cannot think of one more thing to do to it. You look at it, you keep it hanging up in your studio or in your house or your apartment or wherever, and you look at it. You don't stare at it. You don't spend your life looking at it. You go and you do start another piece. That's why I have like 25,000 pieces that I don't have that many. But I have a new series, being homebound, called Fractured. And I'm using, mat board, crescent, like archival mat board, cutting it up and creating these shapes and painting them. And they're all broken up. It's like sort of like cubism, but I'm calling it fractured. And I'm hoping that I could add the second part of that title, Made Whole, because they're broken up, they're brought together to create a piece, and I want the made whole to be what's going to happen to us all in the world when we get over this stuff. But I think, the other element to being an artist is you have to be willing to play. Just play with your materials. If you're not willing to play sometimes, then you end up imitating what everybody else does. Like somebody told me, I remember somebody saying, well, you went to Yale and they taught you. I said, no, you go to Yale and you develop your own work. Even when you're in undergrad school, people teach you things, but your work is not going to look exactly like the person sitting next to you or exactly like the teacher who's teaching you. your work is going to come from you. So you don't have to worry about, not making original work, but some things are going to become interesting to you. Some artists only, there's a guy named Jesse Howard who's in Chicago, and he does charcoal, very intense charcoal. And, you can tell his work anywhere. Cesar Conde is another guy whose work you can tell anywhere. I don't know who you've been exposed to, but probably you've seen Kerry James Marshall. You can tell his work anywhere. There's so many artists in the world. Mary Cassatt, if you want to go way, way back. You can tell her work when you see it. There's a mark, a line, a shape, a color that comes up in each of these works, so you can recognize the artist. So that's what I do. You don't try to imitate people. You try to. You learn by drawing from life, by drawing from observation. But then you can take those things that you learn from direct observation and extend them into something that's meaningful to you. And you'll feel it when it starts happening.
We've got about 4 minutes left in the period, but I wanted to prompt you. I love your story about your mother's advice for the nerves of an artist. I wondered if you wanted to share that.
Okay. Well, I can do it quickly. I had been in a show that I went down to downtown Chicago, River North, and I couldn't walk. I was afraid to go inside because it's a group show. I had submitted my work. I had no idea if it was going to be hanging in the back room, or it was maybe they decided not to install. I didn't know what was going to happen. And so I was really nervous, and I go into the show, and my work is hung in this really prominent location in the gallery. And so I was relieved and also happy. I called my mother and I said, Mom, my mother, who was an opera singer, she sang with the Philadelphia Orchestra Choir. She did solo. She sang for a governor's inauguration in Pennsylvania. She did a lot of singing in her lifetime. And on a stage, I would see her perform. As a matter of fact, she told me when I was little that she had to tell me not to sing with her because I knew all her music, Italian, German, French, But anyway, I said, I'm nervous. I don't know what do you do when you go on the stage? She says, oh, I'm always nervous. I said, you are? She said, yeah, it's good for you. When you're nervous, like if you're nervous about a project that you're working on or a number of things, you might be nervous about, she said, it makes you work better. It makes you work better because you're showing you're feeling something that is going to help contribute to you making work that's good. And I used to write a blog, and I think it's online someplace. I did a show, a friendship show that somebody came up with, and I had to, sort of make a quick decision about it. And I had no idea what I was going to do. I had a very short turnaround, and I made some work for that show, Friends I Dream of, Friends I Know, that was I just loved them. And sold some of them. So selling is not the only thing. Make sure you have a job so you have an income at all times, whether you're selling your work or not. But that's probably it, and work every day if you can.
Yeah.
Just a little bit in your sketchbook, and I was showing, I don't know if I have time. I know you guys gotta go, but I do like little sketches on, this is 8 by 10, 10 by 8. And I just, this is old mat board. And so I just, and play around. I have some collage here with the cut up stuff, so I'm doing so, even if I'm just sitting at the table, I can do something with, graphite. I always have pencils around and stuff. Oh, and this one I really like. I hope, okay. If
Great seeing your work.
If you guys disappear me, it's okay. This guy.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Joyce, it's been such a pleasure to chat with you. Thank you so much, and for bringing you brought props. That's so great. I love to see I love to see the pieces live. Students, I'm going to share Joyce's email that she's generously shared with us with Crystal, and she'll be able to pass that on to you if you have any follow-up questions or looking for some prime advice. You know. She's made herself available, so we're really pleased about that. Thank you. And thank you so much for this time. We really, really appreciate being with you.
It's fun. Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good afternoon, everybody. The students are writing thank you into the chat. Thank you, thank you.
Oh, that's nice. Thanks, guys. Next time, maybe I can come live.
Yes, please. We'd love that.
Right.